Yes, good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Your Honors. Robert Thompson on behalf of the Commonwealth. Your Honors, this is the Commonwealth's appeal from an order of suppression on evidence obtained pursuant to a warrant under Chapter 276, Section 1, and the requirements of Commonwealth versus Blood, authorizing certain recordings to be made. The Commonwealth relied on the single-party consent exception in the wiretap statute
Mr.
to take
Thompson,
it out of that.
excuse me if I may. I think that, my opinion anyway, is that using your imagination, you can maybe get an inference that Santos was in the business of buying and selling guns, using your imagination. But even assuming that he was in that business, what is the evidence here of organization?
The organization here, Your Honor, the murder itself, as with many of the crimes, such as Demore and in Lycus, the murder itself indicated organization. There was 3 individuals involved in the killing. They were out. The evidence indicated that they deliberately sought out and pursued particular targets for their killing. They were prepared to do that. That indicates a prior plan and organized endeavor to be prepared at least to do the killing. The indication here is that the individuals that were shot had just recently borrowed a car that they didn't usually use, just a couple hours earlier, again showing either that they were being kept either under surveillance or that these people were out there hunting.
Under surveillance? I mean,
looking.
why isn't this just a drive-by? I mean, under surveillance? What are you
He
talking
borrowed
about?
it from
Your
his
Honor,
sister.
He bought it from his sister. The indication is that these particular individuals were deliberately sought and targeted. What you have here...
Right, but we have that every day. You read in the newspaper, or we have a case every day that there's a joint enterprise, which is what you have here, a joint enterprise to go out and kill somebody, and they go out and they find the guy and they kill him. So where's the organization to buy and sell guns, which I assume is what your business enterprise is?
Your Honor...
I mean, are you saying that the business is buying and selling guns, or are you saying the business is murder?
What I'm saying, Your Honor, is that we have here a organizational effort that includes not only these individuals, but Santos, that includes a group that has rented a safe house where they meet and discuss their criminal business, as they did here immediately after the murder.
What is their criminal business?
Your Honor, the criminal business, in this case, as in some of the other cases, the complete picture is not available here. The motive for the crime is not available here. We don't know that information.
Crime. So how can you say that you're not answering my question? When I say what is the business, you have to show that organized crime is in some business of doing something.
Your Honor, what we have from the case law is that there has to be a reasonable suspicion that the recordings will lead to information of a organized crime. What we have here, at the least, is a connection to Santos, and Santos has a connection to at least, we've been tied to at least 3 different guns, one of which was previously stolen in New Hampshire, which he sold to Tavares. We have a prior shooting, at least, of Walter Matthau on behalf of Santos by Tavares using that same gun. We have an organization that has a safe house that they use to discuss their criminal business.
In your brief, you tell us on page 21 that there was also information in the affidavit evidencing the purpose of the organization. And then you go on to tell us what you say the purpose was.
I'm suggesting that at the least here, Your Honor, there's a tie to the selling and availability of guns. At the least. I'm also saying that this is a situation such as Lycus, such as Demore, where the full picture is not available to the police, so that there is a reasonable. What I'm saying is, the organization is, I'm suggesting, plainly apparent. There is an organization, there is a group involving at the least these 3 perpetrators and Santos that meet at this safe house. Now, the purpose of the organization is suggested. It's the reasonable suspicion that it involves these guns.
Did Officer McGrath ever articulate that inference in his affidavit?
And he doesn't need to, Your Honor. That's not the point here, whether he
But
himself
my question is,
articulated.
He doesn't do that. He does not at any place articulate that the business, that the organization here is the focus of, is the sale of guns.
No, he doesn't articulate that, no, Your Honor, and he doesn't need to. The conclusions drawn by the affiant aren't the controlling matter here. And, Your Honor, this is a case that was the warrant was issued prior to this court's decision in Long. And frankly, the condition in Long, I'm not suggesting it was wrongly decided, but up until that point, the case law had seemed to indicate that establishing a criminal organization, a joint criminal pre-planned effort was sufficient under the wiretap statute.
But isn't everything not everything, but aren't many murders pre-planned? I mean, that's what joint enterprise is all about, some planning.
Your Honor, what we have here, though, what I'm suggesting is not just because there's some planning in a joint enterprise, but we have this organization, which Santos, in an inferably supervisory sort of position, that he meets with these people beforehand. He meets with, at least he's talking to the CI beforehand, who was also talking to Tavares immediately beforehand. Which inferably suggests that they're all together. But he also meets immediately thereafter. He's expressing his approval or disapproval of the actions. This is a group that has resources to rent a safe house. This is not a simple pre-planned for some unknown motive of revenge or not. This is not like Long, where there was a clear motive of revenge for a prior fight that same day. This is not like it's the case of Yerbeck, where it's clear that there was a limited purpose behind the crime and no suggestion of anything further. What we have here is an organization that has resources, that makes plans, that does things, and we know at least that they also have access to multiple guns, and one at least which was illegal, and that they've taken actions associated with those guns in the past, including shooting the Walter Montero. I suggest that in the total, that is at least a reasonable suspicion that the recordings here will lead to information that will flesh out the nature of that organized crime. And that is enough under our case law.
In Long, we said that the other hallmarks of organized crime, discipline, organization, and a continuing nature, were utterly lacking. What evidence, I asked you before, of discipline and organization do we have here?
We have the longer-term relationship between Santos and Tavares associated with
Discipline?
with guns.
Relationship, but doesn't show any discipline.
Your Honor, it shows actions on behalf of Santos in the earlier shooting, again associated with the guns. It shows a organization that has resources, that has rented a safe house where they can go and discuss their criminal business, as they did immediately after their criminal actions, at least if not criminal business, as they did immediately after here. That shows a group with indeed long-term resources, long-term planning, long-term efforts, Your Honor. This is in that situation such as Lycos, where there is indeed a reasonable suspicion of organized crime and gaps in the picture that cannot be said to lead to a conclusion that there's no reason to believe organized crime is here. Gaps, as in Lycos, gaps that were not present in Long or in the case of Yerbeck, because they knew the motive for the shooting. They knew what happened there. They had no reason to believe there was any prior actions together here at all. Here we do have that prior actions. We have it in the connection between Tavares and Santos and the guns, Your Honor.
So, and without the need for any expert opinion by Officer McGrath, you're saying that the facts that are set forth in this affidavit essentially jump off the page, and any person of ordinary intelligence could conclude that this is organized crime?
That's not the standard, Your Honor. The standard here is whether it is minimally adequate for someone to have reasonably draw that conclusion, and it's a matter, this is not an area that particularly requires expertise. It's a matter of areas that requires common sense inferences and whether the inferences are reasonable. This is, as the case in Commonwealth, Demore says, the point here, this deference should be given, it doesn't say that, what it says is that the question The issue is whether the language is minimally adequate to raise those suspicions, and that the court, the reviewing court, neither this court nor the court that did the suppression, does a de novo hearing. Rather, the situation is deference is given to the issuing magistrate, the one who originally looks at that. So I suggest there's a degree of discretion in this area, and that you need to look at whether any reasonable person could find that there is reasonable suspicion that this recording would lead to information connection to organized crime. Your Honors, I think that covers it. If there's any extra questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll rely on my brief.
Good morning, Your Honors. Attorney Frank Splain for the appellee Paolo Tavares. I suggest, Your Honor, it breaks down into two categories. Does the affidavit show that this is criminal activity that's organized and related to an illegal business, or is it, as the motion judge found, a criminal activity that's a single, isolated event? Okay,
if I could just take it step by step. Do you agree that under our language in law that some evidence of an ongoing illegal business operation is sufficient to establish organized crime? That if the affidavit provides some evidence of an ongoing illegal business operation, that's enough to provide reasonable suspicion that there's an organized crime connection, which is...
But the offense has to be related or connected to that illegal business. That would, right. I would agree with that that caveat.
Okay. Now here... why would individuals who are not involved in an ongoing illegal business operation pay rent to maintain a safe house?
Well, again, the Commonwealth is characterizing it as a safe house. It could be a house where people go to use drugs, which is a common occurrence also. There's a number of reasons why...
But the affidavit says they rent it.
Right.
And they don't live there.
Well, they don't really, the affidavit doesn't give a location where they live, really, Your Honor. It gives several locations where they stay. One inference could be, certainly, it's a safe house where they go to conduct criminal activity. The other inference could be it's a house where they go to use marijuana or drugs. Another inference could be it's a house where they're somewhat transient. They take turns renting or staying out.
It's a house that it's on paragraph 22.
That's correct.
Meet him at the M, which the CI explained was a house they rent from a drug addict on Market Street. So it's a house they rent. It's a house they meet at.
That's correct.
We also have Mr. Tavares shooting Montero because he stole a gun from Santos, and Santos was willing to let it go, but Tavares said he would not let it go. Does that not indicate some relationship with regard to Tavares and Santos, by which Tavares is not going to let Santos be dissed by anybody?
That's correct. But
does that not suggest some illegal operation that indicates that deterrence of anybody playing with them, combined with the safe house, combined with the fact that Santos said the decedent was my boy, and Tavares says he was my boy too, indicating some connection between, some gang connection between the decedent and Tavares and Santos? I mean, there was some indication here of discipline, that Tavares was upset because Santos was teed off at him because he had shot my boy. Is that not enough to provide the indicia of an illegal operation? You have the safe house, you've got the retaliation against somebody who's stealing a gun from Santos, and you have the indication that they're my boys, indicating some gang connection. Why is that not some evidence of an ongoing illegal business operation?
Again, taking them one at a time, again, I wouldn't characterize it as a safe house. They rent it from a drug dealer. I would suggest that there's an equal presumption that it's a house where they go to use narcotics, or where they go to maybe one of them stays occasionally. I've buttressed that by the fact that unlike Long, where the court was relying on a man making phone calls from recorded cells, the confidential informant is very, very tight with these individuals. He's known Tavares for 8 years. He seems to be part of the group. If that were the case and it was a safe house where they discussed criminal activity, they would do it, one would assume, in front of the confidential informant at the safe house. The confidential informant would say to the police, hey, these guys buy and sell drugs, guns, I know them. There is an absence of that. Despite the fact that in their midst you have a guy who knows them very well, you've kind of got to piece out and pull out various sentences to get to this level of organization. With regard to your question regarding the Tavares allegedly shooting the other individual, it doesn't appear that that shooting's related to any business or protection of Santos' business interests. It appears to be more of a street thing where Tavares isn't going to let, and I think the words he uses, Santos be a bitch, and therefore is involved in that. But it doesn't, certainly doesn't indicate from the confidential informant's knowledge or conversations that that was a result of protecting a business interest. The shooting of the individual in this case, they don't know. It appears that that is a mistake if you take the confidential informant's representation. There is no motive, and I think the Commonwealth conceded in its motion, there's never a motive given for the shooting. So whether or not the shooting was a result of a guy cutting me off and they're PO'd at him and they go after him, or they see someone on the street who they don't like, who one of them has had problems with in the past, is all speculative.
But what difference does it make where there's evidence in the affidavit that the confidential informant said that there was a discussion among these people? They got the wrong guy. I mean, but so that there was some target out there. For whatever reason, there was some target out there.
Right. At some point, certainly at some point, a decision to kill is made. The question is, in the case law, when you're talking about organized crime, disciplined groups, highly organized business or monetary interest, they also talk about a plan, a plan for the crime. For instance, a ransom note would be a plan. The Commonwealth has alleged that...
Plan to kill a guy.
Right. The Commonwealth has alleged that this was planned out because was following all that. I would suggest none of that is articulated in McGrath's affidavit. The only evidence we have is that they believe that they killed the wrong guy. They give no reason. And remember, this is their close buddy. They give no reason to the close buddy as to why they were after this guy. The close buddy doesn't say they planned it. I was with them. They talked about it. Went wrong. We had this big elaborate plan. The only evidence you have of premeditation, if you will, is the person in the car. Archer says, we saw the car a short distance behind us. It followed us down one street, pulled up, flashed its high beams, pulled up, and started shooting. That's it. That to the extent of a plan, that is the only evidence in McGrath's affidavit that there was any type of plan.
But then if you add to that plus the statements about they got the wrong guy, that suggests there was a plan to get someone, we don't know who the right guy was, but they followed in a car. There was a shooting. They pulled over and shot through the passenger side. And then they said, we got the wrong guy. And a couple of them apparently said that it was the wrong guy. So doesn't that equal a plan to murder?
But it's got to be planned connected to the illegal sale of services.
Right. And I'm talking about, again, I walk into a bar, and me and my buddy, like in Long, see somebody we don't like or we just had a fight with and we kill them, versus I'm going to kill Jimmy, the rival drug dealer. Let's follow him, find out where he goes, and then kill him. I think one scenario is I hate to use the word garden variety, but it's mentioned in some of the cases, the drive-by street shooting where you're driving around, you see a rival individual, somebody you don't like, somebody who stole your girlfriend, and you open fire, versus that guy's in a competing business, for instance. That guy's a customer who hasn't paid me. Let's go after him. Let's Let's figure this out, find out where he is, hop in the car, get the weapons. Now that could have been demonstrated if it were true. Certainly the confidential informant who knows these guys could have said they were after this guy, or they were after another guy and they got the wrong guy because he did X, because he did Y, because he's in business. But there isn't any of that. So anything past that, I would suggest, is speculative.
So you're saying that if we look at this affidavit, we will find absolutely no connection between the killing and some hypothetical business of selling guns that Santos was running?
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, certainly, again, the confidential informant who's their friend, if it were true, if the killing was connected to a business, you would think that these individuals would mention it to the confidential informant when they're discussing the shooting. You know, instead of we got the wrong guy and Santos is pissed that we got the wrong guy and he's a friend of somebody's, it would be, you know, this guy was a competitor, this guy didn't pay us, this guy tried to steal our guns. And again, the only evidence of a gun business, I would suggest, and certainly McGrath, if you read his affidavit, isn't investigating a gun-selling operation.
So maybe the confidential informant isn't so high up in this organization. I mean, don't they need him basically as a source of transportation because they lost their rental car?
Well, get back to the transportation. The confidential informant says that he's given them rides before and after. Their evidence is for my client's girlfriend, it's the girlfriend's car, not her sister, that my client's girlfriend rented the car because her car was in a fire.
Yeah, but this guy's only a driver. He's not high up in the organization.
Well,
so he picks up bits and pieces of things, and they don't really confide, you know, the essence of what they're doing to him.
My reading of the affidavit is he's very close to these individuals. They admit to a shooting in front of him. They contact him numerous occasions. He's in whatever inner circle you want to call it. He's with them. There certainly doesn't appear to be holding anything back from him. Certainly you wouldn't, someone you didn't trust or wasn't in the inner circle, you wouldn't admit to a shooting. And in fact, Tavares says to him at some point, you know, it's not much of a case. As long as the witness doesn't say anything, you know, nothing's going to happen. So certainly those statements would appear that he's in the inner circle. He certainly sells it to the police if you read the affidavit, that he's in the know, that he's of use, that he's privy to these conversations. So I don't take it, my reading of it isn't that this is somebody on the outside. He's inside, and he's somebody you would expect if it was a gun-selling business. And if the murder was, or the shooting was related to that, he would know it. They would say it to him.
We have to play the cards we're dealt, and the
That's
cards
correct.
we're dealt is information in the affidavit. So even if arguably this person could have had more information, that doesn't matter, does it? I mean,
Well,
we have to look to see what's here.
Right. Well, in Long, there was kind of the discussion about we have to look at the affidavit, keeping in mind that what the individual's saying, he's saying over recorded line. How would a police officer interpret that? It may not be as if you will, as forthright as, hey, let's go get those witnesses because I know I'm recorded. So little things like I want to save an indictment now could take on a different meaning. I'd suggest if you apply it to this case, where when McGrath filling out the affidavit, having access to this informant, if it were the case that he had information, McGrath had information that this was a gun-selling operation.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be a gun-selling operation. All it needs to be is an illegal operation, correct?
But it has to be articulated, though, in the affidavit.
You mean you have to identify what illegality is being committed in order to fit within the definition of organized crime? You just can't prove that there is an illegal, albeit unspecified operation?
I think you have to show what the operation is.
You have to connect the
Crime to the
murder
operation. So
to the thing.
if you don't allege the operation, if you know.
Okay, but so you're saying you have to say this is a gambling operation or a loan sharking operation? You just can't say that they're involved in various illegal activities? Is that what you're saying?
You have to have evidence of the activities in the affidavit. Otherwise, how else would a judge know that it's
Okay,
reasonable?
well, at least we have a hit of somebody who was the right, apparently aiming at somebody who was the right guy, or targeting somebody who was the right guy and hitting the wrong guy. And the language, by the way, of the safe house is not that Tavares rents the safe house, it's that they rent the safe house, rent this other place. So this is a collective rental in paragraph 22.
Again, but it's the characterization of a safe house. I think you could easily characterize it as a house they rent to do drugs. A safe house seems to indicate to me, my layman definition of it is where people go to plan criminal activities.
Okay, but they've got money.
They've got money to rent, certainly.
There needs
Money to
be
buy cigarettes, they got,
There needs to be some connection between the murder and the sale of goods and organized
That's correct.
activity towards the sale of goods and services. So whether it's guns or something else, but it's just not clear what, if anything, it is.
and that's because I would suggest that the shooting wasn't related to any business, that it was a street drive-by shooting. More, it's easy. It's just as simple to be read that they didn't like the individual they were shooting at, or one of them didn't like it. That there was no planning, that there was no connection to any type of business, and really the only evidence of any type of business is that one gun sale from Santos to Tavares. No other information in there about any other type of business activity or ongoing business activity also, not just the business activity. And time's up, so thank you.
Thank you.